Hello students, I hope you all are doing great. Welcome back to the daily news analysis. I'm your educator Prithviraj Singh. So today we'll be understanding the important news articles of 28th of March 2022. Guys, there have been a news where European Union envoy is visiting Iran's foreign minister, and this is a very important visit because Iran, you all know, was there under the deal with America called as JCPOA, Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Guys, I'll just give you a brief history of Iran. Iran was a signatory of NPT. It is still a signatory of NPT, which is Non-Proliferation Treaty, which was signed in the year 1970, right? And Iran was a member signatory of NPT, correct? But instead of being, in spite of being into NPT, which says that the countries must, take actions against proliferation of nuclear technology. That means those countries who are signatories of NPT should not, use the uranium enrichment, should not build the nuclear reactor for defense purposes, right? Now, Iran was a signatory of NPT. It was a member of NPT, but then also in the last few decades, it started its secret nuclear operations, right? It started building its nuclear fissile material, uranium enrichment, and many nuclear power plants were being built by Iran, right, secretly, right? So it was running a secret nuclear operations, right? And this was in turn a threat to the world, and in particular Middle East countries, right? Now, in the year 2015, a deal was being signed because against these nuclear operations, nuclear reactors, America started imposing sanctions on Iran. They were diplomatic sanctions, there was arms embargo, there were many trade sanctions being imposed on Iran so as to cut off Iran from the main world or mainstream trade channels, right? So impositions and sanctions were being imposed on Iran, right? Now, in 2015, a deal was being signed called as JCPOA, which stands for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. I repeat, JCPOA, as a deal was signed in the year 2015, it stands for Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. Now, this was a agreement between Iran and P5+1 nations, right? So it was a deal between Iran and P5+1 nations. Now, these P5 are the permanent members of United Nations Security Council. Now, you all know the permanent members of the Security Council, which are United States, UK, France, Russia, right? China, correct? So these are the permanent members, the 5 permanent members: US, UK, France, Russia, and China. So these 5 permanent members of the Security Council were the were the part of this agreement, plus 1. Now, this P5+1 here, 1 stands for Germany, right? Wherever the word P5+1 is mentioned, this 1 is Germany, right? So P5+1 and Iran. It was a successful agreement where, all the sanctions, the trade embargoes which were imposed on Iran by America were being slashed off, were being removed, on the condition that Iran must open up its nuclear facilities for the inspections from the world's agencies, atomic energy agencies, right? Plus, it should stop the nuclear enrichment as early as possible. Iran agreed to it because Iran's economy was actually, going on a downward trajectory because of the harsh sanctions being imposed by America, right? So it opened up its nuclear facilities for the foreign inspections on the condition that the sanctions must be removed. So the deal was a successful one, and the sanctions on Iran were being removed. But it happened in the year 2018. American president, Donald Trump, found that Iran is not stopping its uranium enrichment, and it's still secretly, going ahead with the uranium enrichment, and many nuclear power plants were actually producing the nuclear fissile material. So in 2018, Trump, representing America, withdrew from JCPOA. The moment America withdrew from or came out from JCPOA, the deal was closed, right? Because America was the most important country and the one who has imposed, all the sanctions on Iran. So after the withdrawal from JCPOA, America again imposed sanctions. America again imposed sanctions on Iran, right? But the other countries like UK, France, Russia and China, they were still there in JCPOA, and they were but because the agreement JCPOA died after the withdrawal of America, but the remaining countries always were pushing for the revival of JCPOA, right? And it has been found that post the withdrawal of America, Iran has increased its nuclear enrichment, and it is building its nuclear fissile material, right? Now there are talks going on in a place called as Vienna in Austria, right? And its objective is the revival of JCPOA, the revival of JCPOA, right? Where all the JCPOA member countries, P5+1 and Iran, are there in Vienna. I mean, they are being represented in Vienna for the revival of JCPOA, right? Now this deal is very important because of the fact that Russia has invaded Ukraine, and in order to remove the dependency of the European countries on the oil and natural gas from Russia, the deal is very important because, mind you, Iran is the third largest exporter of the crude oil, right? And if sanctions are being imposed on Iran, it would be detrimental for the interest of the world, provided the fact that Russia is seeing severe sanctions by America after its invasion of Ukraine, and therefore in order to remove the dependency of the European countries and many others on Russia, this deal has now become very, very important. So the revival of JCPOA, guys, is very important so that the Russia can completely be isolated, and the dependency on Russia can be lessened, right? I hope it is clear. So the European Union's coordinator is visiting Iran for the revival of 2015 nuclear deal, right? As I just mentioned, right? So I hope this is clear, and I expect a question on this, guys. A very important article. So the things that I just mentioned are written here. JCPOA, it was signed in the year 2015. However, it came in effect from 1st of January 2016, and these are the member countries and the sanctions, etc. Guys, Saudi Arabia is threatening that Iran, if it is not being stopped, from building the nuclear fissile material, and if in case Iran, conducts a nuclear test, then Saudi Arabia would also, detonate a nuclear weapon in order to save its or protect its frontiers, right? So therefore, it is a threat to the world. Even Israel, which is the arch enemy of Iran, is also explicitly opposed to the agreement, calling it too lenient. So guys, this is the geostrategic position of Iran. You can see located here, and it touches its land boundary touches various Central Asian countries. We all know that Chabahar port is being built by India in order to counter a port which is being developed by China called as Gwadar port, right? Similarly, there is one more port called as Bandar Abbas, which is also sees Indian and the Russian investment, right? Now India is building this dam so that the Central Asian countries may be connected, including Afghanistan, right? Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, right? And many other European countries, right? Now this is also called as International North-South Transport Corridor, and a part of this is called as Ashgabat Pact or Agreement, right? Ashgabat is the capital of Turkmenistan, right? So Iran is very, very important, and this is the strategic geostrategic location of Iran, right? So it would give India access to the Central Asian countries of Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, so on and so forth, right? I hope it is clear. So guys, they may ask you that who is the present president of Iran. The answer is Ibrahim Raisi, right? Very important. Ibrahim Raisi is the present president of Iran, and he is there in the office since August 2021, right? So in this sense, it is a it is a new appointment. Therefore, there is a high possibility of it being asked in the examination, right? Ibrahim Raisi, right? Now, what are the India's interest in the deal? Definitely, the Chabahar port, Bandar Abbas port, the access to the Central Asian countries, the oil import, right? To neutralize the Chinese presence at Gwadar port, as I just mentioned. These are the nuclear facilities, guys, in Iran. The Fordo port was the Fordo nuclear power plant. Fordo nuclear power plant is very, very important. They may ask you that Fordo NPP or nuclear power plant is located in which country? It is in Iran. Now, however, it is being converted from fuel enrichment to technology center. Similarly, Natanz nuclear power plant is also very important, and now it is Iran's only uranium enrichment plant, right? Natanz is also very much in news, right? So Natanz and Fordo nuclear power plant are very much in news, very important. Coming to the next news article, states can identify minorities as it is being stated by the central government, right? Guys, there have been many, I would say, ambiguity with regard to the declaration of minorities. Many were in the opinion that it is the only central government which has the power to identify the minority community in the country. Minority are those community which are lesser in number, right? They can be religious minority, they can be linguistic minority, right? So on and so forth, right? For example, Marwadis in Tamil Nadu may be called as minorities, correct? Similarly, Tamilians in Rajasthan may be called as minorities, right, in terms of language, right? Now, the government has decided that in 9 places, which are Ladakh and the northeast states of Mizoram, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, plus Lakshadweep, Kashmir, and Punjab, right? Now these 9 states or 9 places are being identified in this case, and here you have people practicing Hinduism, Bahaism is also one of the religion, Bahaism, and also Judaism, right? So Judaism, Hinduism, and Bahaism are the religion which are being practiced in these 9 places, as you can see on the screen, right? The central government has declared that in these 9 places where Hinduism, Bahaism, and Judaism are being practiced, the member of these religious communities would be declared as minorities, right? Would be declared as minorities, and this would be done by the concerned state government, and no central government's intervention would be required, right? So the state government can consider laying down the guidelines to identify them as minority communities at the state level, right? And the state governments can establish and administer educational institutions of their choice, right? And lay down the guidelines for identification of minority at state level, right, by the state government, right? So their rights, the rights of these minorities would be protected, and the minority education institutions would be set up, and these minorities would be decided and identified by the state governments and not the central government, right? I hope it is clear, guys. This comes because it can be done so only with a constitutional provision, right? Guys, entry 20 in the constitution in concurrent list, right? We all know that India is a federal country. By federal, I mean that the powers are vertically divided. The legislative, executive and financial powers are vertically divided between the center and the state, right? And there are three lists. List 1, which is union list. List 2, state list. And as you all know, list 3 is a concurrent list. Now these are mentioned under 7th schedule of the constitution. How many schedules are there? 12 schedules, right? So 7th schedule, which is your article 246, very important, and I expect a question on this. They may ask you that which article talks about 7th schedule. So article 246 deals with the 7th schedule. It is also called as the federal list, right? The 7th schedule has 3 lists, list 1, 2 and 3. List 1, over list 1 only the parliament can make laws. Over list 2 only the state government can make laws, I mean the state assembly can make laws. And in list 3 both the parliament as well as the assembly can make laws, but in times of conflict the law of the parliament shall prevail, right? So that means the law making power is concurrent with the union and the state. Both can make laws. As far as the execution is concerned of the laws being made, it is with state government, and in times of conflict the law of the parliament shall prevail, right? Now in concurrent list you have one entry called as entry 20, and this talks about economic and social planning. Economic and social planning, entry 20 of the concurrent list. Now under the 7th schedule you have concurrent list, list 3rd, where you have entry 20 which talks about economic and social planning, right? So this, the center is saying that entry 20 would be used to enact laws to promote and protect the interest of minorities, right? Because when you are promoting and protecting the interest of minorities, you are actually doing the economic and social planning, isn't it? Right? So you are under your economic and social planning, you are kind of promoting and protecting the interest of the minorities, right? So this is something which is being is the response of the central government, right? So as I said that religious and linguistic minorities are spread all over the country and are not related or restricted to any single state or union territory, right? The center has given the example of how Maharashtra has notified Jews as minority community within the state, right? So they may ask you guys, this is a mood question, they may ask you that which among the following states have notified or have decided, identified Jews, right, who practice Zoroastrianism, right, as, or Parsis, Jews as a minority community within the state, right? So the Maharashtra government has notified Jews as a minority community within the state. Very important, and I expect a question on this. Again, Karnataka government also notified Urdu, Telugu, Tulu. Tulu is a language of North Kannada, plus Lambadi, Hindi and Konkani and Gujarati as minority languages within the state, right? Although if you talk in North India, if you come to North India, places like Rajasthan, MP, UP are Hindi belt, right? But Karnataka is non-Hindi belt, right? So they have identified Hindi, Konkani, Gujarati, Marathi, Tulu, Lavambadi, Telugu, Tamil, Malayalam as, you know, minority languages, correct? Guys, has also been the reference of National Commission for Minority Educational Institutions Act, right? So the government has defended the constitutionality of Section 2 Clause F of the National Commission for Minority Institution Act and Section 2 Clause C of National Commission for Minorities Act. So they may ask you that in which year the National Commission for Minorities was National Commission for Minority Act was passed. So this was in the year 1992, right? So the government is defending the constitutionality of these two provisions, these two acts. One talks about the Minority Educational Institutions Act and the other is National Commission for Minorities Act, right? So the central government has the executive competence to notify a community as a minority under Section 2 Clause C of these acts, but the central government notified 6 communities, right? So these acts, under these acts, you know, which I mentioned, National Commission for Minorities Act 1992, the central government gets the power to notify or identify the minorities, right? And it identified 6 communities as minorities. You all know Muslim, Christian, Sikhs, Buddhist, Parsis and Jains, right? So Muslim, Christians, Sikhs, Buddhist, Parsis and Jains were being declared as minorities under Section 2 Clause C of the National Commission of Minorities Act 1992. So they may ask you that the central government has identified or notified which among the following communities as minorities under National Commission for Minorities Act 1992. So the answer should be this only, right? I hope it is clear. But now the central government is saying by invoking entry 20 of the concurrent list that even the state government in these 9 places have the right to identify and notify these communities, Hinduism, Bahaism, Judaism as minority communities, religious communities in these 9 places, 9 states. I hope it is clear. Right, so the same thing which I explained. Guys, you all know that there is also a fundamental right, Article 30 Clause 1, which gives the linguistic and religious minorities a fundamental right to establish and administer the educational institutions of their choice, right? So they can establish and administer the educational institutions of their choice, right? Now it gives the right to the linguistic and religious minorities, right? So here there are 2 words which are mentioned. Number 1, linguistic means language based and religious means religion based. So linguistic and religious minorities have the fundamental right. It is a fundamental right, Article 30 Clause 1, to establish and administer the educational institutions of their choice. I hope it is clear, right? So Article 30 Clause 1 is very, very important. Article 30 Clause 1 is fundamental right given to the linguistic and religious minorities to administer their educational institutions, right? I hope it is clear. Moving to the editorials section. Guys, there was an interesting article and relevant article in the Hindu editorial page, the move to ease voting for overseas citizens. Guys, we know that there is a huge Indian diaspora working in various countries, right? Because of the job opportunities, they leave the country and they, you know, go for new job prospects, right? Now the Indian government is thinking to ease the voting process for the overseas citizens. Let us understand the article. On March 25, just 3 days back, the Minister for Law and Justice, Kiran Rijiju, in response to a question in Lok Sabha, stated that the government was exploring the possibility of allowing the online voting for NRIs. Guys, that means the voting for NRIs is still there, but it is a physical voting or postal ballot. Right. But the government of India is exploring the online voting for the NRIs, right, in order to increase the vote base of the political party, right. Now, the minister's statement on easing the voting for NRIs comes in the wake of a proposal made by Election Commission of India that wrote to the Law Ministry in November 2020, right. So, Election Commission of India has written to the Law Ministry in the year 2020 to extend the facility of postal ballots to eligible NRIs for various state assembly elections to be held in 2021. Guys, you all know that the 5 states which went into election, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Uttarakhand, right, then you had Goa and Manipur, right. Now, the Election Commission of India also had written to the Law Ministry to extend the facility of postal ballots to the eligible NRIs, right. So, those eligible NRIs who are eligible for voting would get the postal ballots, right, for the various state assembly elections to be held in 2021, right. Now, the Election Commission of India then had proposed amending the Conduct of Elections Rules 1961. So, these are the rules which govern the elections in India, Conduct of Elections Rule 1961. In order to allow this facility, the postal ballots were to be sent to NRIs, right, electronically, after which they will send the ballots back after choosing their candidate via post, right. That means the postal ballots, would be sent to the NRIs electronically. They'll get a mail, right. They have to take a printout of that form and they have to fill the details, right, and they have to put it in a sealed cover envelope and then have to send to the poll officer via post. That means via mail post, correct. So, this is how the Election of Commission of India was to extend the facility of postal ballots to the NRIs. I hope it is clear. Guys, prior to 2010, the overseas citizens were not eligible to cast their votes. I repeat, prior to 2010, the overseas citizens were not eligible to cast their votes in the Indian elections, right. This was because NRI's name was automatically deleted from the electoral roll if they stayed abroad or outside the country for more than 6 months at a stretch, right. So, that means if a person is staying abroad outside India for more than 6 months continuously, his name would be automatically deleted from the electoral roll, correct. Now, this was changed when the Representation of People's Act, Amendment Act was being passed in the year 2010. Very important. The RPA, which first came in the year 1950, which talks about the election process, the malpractices, the rules, the disqualifications, etc., was later amended in the year 1951, then in 1966, so on and so forth. So, the same RPA was amended in the year 2010 and it made the NRIs eligible who stayed abroad beyond 6 months eligible to cast their vote, but only in person. That means they have to go physically at the polling station where they have been enrolled as an overseas elector, right. So, guys, today what we have is postal ballots, right, where you'll get a mail, you have to download the form, you have to fill the form, right, you have to print the form and then you have to put it in the sealed envelope and mail it to the concerned officer. But prior to 2010, the voting rights were not given to the NRIs or the overseas citizens, because their names were being deleted automatically if they were staying outside India for a continuous time period of 6 months, right. In 2010, the Representation of People's Act was amended and it allowed the voting rights to be given to NRIs, but only when they go in person, right? That means physical presence at the polling station where they have enrolled as an overseas electors, correct? I hope it is clear. Now, just as any resident Indian citizen above the age of 18 years is eligible to vote in constituency where he or she is a resident, overseas Indian citizen are also eligible to do so, right? Now they are as good as the Indian citizen casting his or her vote, right? In case of overseas voters, their address mentioned in the passport is taken as the place of ordinary residence and chosen as the constituency for the overseas voter to enroll in, right? That means they have to come to India, right, to cast their vote in a constituency in which their address is, which is being mentioned in the passport, is there, right? So if their address in the passport is in Rajasthan, in, let's say, in Udaipur, in particular area, Hiran Magri, let's say, so they have to go there and cast their vote physically, right? So, but then it was very tedious process because no one would come to India, you know, just to cast their vote, right? Because the cost is associated is huge. Guys, from merely 11,000 overseas voters who registered in 2014, the number went up to close to 1 lakh in 2019. But the bulk of them belong to just one state, that is Kerala, right? Now, the Representation of Peoples Act envisaged voters as only the ordinary residents in a constituency who will choose representatives to represent their local interest while mediating on larger issues in legislature, right? Guys, section 21A part 3 of the RPA addresses this to some extent by qualifying a person absenting himself temporarily from his place of ordinary residence shall not. Now we'll understand that what is the situation now, right? The provision of having to visit the polling booth in person has discouraged eligible voters from exercising their mandate, right? Because of the associated traveling cost, right? Now in 2017, recently, the Parliament proposed a bill to remove the restriction imposed by section 20A of RPA, which required them to be physically present to vote in their constituencies, right? तो 2017 के अंदर पार्लियामेंट में जो है एक बिल प्रपोज हुआ था. In that it was being said that the physical presence, you know, coming from a foreign country to India in their constituency to cast their vote was being deliberated, was actually being removed, right? The bill provided for overseas voters to be able to appoint a proxy to cast their votes on their behalf, right? Subject to conditions laid down in the conduct of election rule, right? For example, a Indian citizen, a NRI living in America can choose any proxy person, right? Any proxy, or he can appoint any proxy in India, and this proxy person would be casting the vote on this American person, right? That means Indian NRI living in America, right? So इतना सा है कि an Indian citizen who is there living in America would choose a proxy, would appoint a proxy, and this proxy would vote, you know, on behalf of the Indian citizen living in America, right? So this would, you know, remove all the traveling cost, associated traveling costs, right? This was definitely certainly a good idea, isn't it? The bill was passed in 2018, but हुआ ये later it was lapsed with the dissolution of the 16th Lok Sabha, right? In the first tenure of Prime Minister Modi, right? Now the Election Commission of India then approached the government to permit NRIs to vote via postal ballots, similar to a system that is already used by service voters. तो अब इसमें गवर्नमेंट इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया ने कहा, क्योंकि बिकॉज दैट बिल वाज बीइंग लैप्स्ड बिकॉज ऑफ द डिसोल्यूशन ऑफ लोकसभा, नाउ द इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया अप्रोच द गवर्नमेंट टू परमिट एनआरआईज टू वोट वाया पोस्टल बैलेट्स, राइट? पोस्टल बैलेट्स, जैसे मैंने कहा कि दे रिसीव एन इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली transmitted, electronically transmitted postal ballot system, also called as ETPBS, electronically transmitted postal ballot system. They'll receive an email, they will download it, they would get it printed and write their details and their voting choice. As it is being used by the service voters, means a member of armed forces of the union, right? Because बहुत सारे जो पुलिस फोर्स है वो भी सिक्योरिटी के अंदर इन्वॉल्व होती है, राइट? एंड दे आर नॉट एबल टू कास्ट देयर वोट, राइट? सो व्हाट दे यूज इज पोस्टल बैलेट्स, राइट? A member of the armed forces of the union or a member of the force to which provisions of the Army Act 1950 is applicable, right? Now what is ETPBS and how does it function? Let us understand. Guys, the conduct of election rules 1961 was amended in 2016. अब जो 1961 का जो इलेक्शन कंडक्ट ऑफ इलेक्शन रूल है उसको 2016 में अमेंड कर दिया. वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. टू अलाउ द सर्विस वोटर्स टू यूज द ETPBS. Under this system, the postal ballots are sent electronically to registered service voters, right? So that means the postal ballots are sent electronically to registered service voters, right? Now we'll understand that how it is being used by NRIs. The service voters can then download the ETPB along with the declaration form and cover, register their mandate on the ballot and send it to the returning officer of the constituency via ordinary mail, right? तो आपने पोस्टल बैलेट जो है इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली पोस्टल जो बैलेट है उसको आपने डाउनलोड किया, यू जस्ट फिल्ड इट and you have sent it, you mail it to the returning officer, right? The post will include an attested declaration form after being signed by the voter in presence of an appointed senior officer who will attest it, right? तो attestation भी होगा इसका in presence of the senior officer, right? The postal ballot must reach the returning officer by 8 AM on the day of the counting of results, right? So that means जिस दिन जो वोट जो रिजल्ट्स जो है वो काउंटिंग होती है वोट्स की, उसमें मतलब इट शुड रीच द पोस्टल बैलेट शुड रीच द रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर बाय 8 AM, राइट? द ECI प्रपोज टू एक्सटेंड दिस फैसिलिटी टू ओवरसीज वोटर्स एज वेल. सो जो फैसिलिटी जो है सर्विस वोटर्स के लिए अवेलेबल थी पोस्टल बैलेट की, इलेक्ट्रॉनिकली पोस्टल बैलेट सिस्टम की, वो ओवरसीज वोटर के लिए भी कर दिया गया है, राइट? फॉर दिस टू कमेंस द लॉ मिनिस्ट्री हैज टू अमेंड द कंडक्ट ऑफ इलेक्शन रूल 1961, राइट? Now in the case of NRI voters, those seeking to vote through ETPBS will have to inform the returning officer at least 5 days after notification of the election. That means after the notification of the election, post the expiry of 5 days, at least 5 days after the notice of the election, right? So whenever the notice of the election comes, they have to inform the returning officer within 5 days of the notice of the election, right? I hope it is clear. Now the returning officer will then send the ballot electronically via the ETPBS, right? And then the NRI voter can then register his or her mandate on the ballot printout and send it back with an attested declaration in a process similar to the सर्विस वोटर, राइट? सेम चीज़ फॉलो होगी जो सर्विस वोटर के अंदर के केस में हो रहा है, एक्सेप्ट इन दिस केस द सीनियर ऑफिसर वुड बी अपॉइंटेड बाय इंडियन डिप्लोमेट, राइट? क्योंकि फॉरेन एम्बेसी में जो इंडियन डिप्लोमेट है वो इस रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर को अपॉइंट करेगा और कंज्यूलर रिप्रेजेंटेटिव इन द रेजिडेंट कंट्री ऑफ द NRI. सो आई होप इट इज़ क्लियर, राइट? सो द सर्विस वोटर के लिए जो केस है, जो प्रोसेस है वोटिंग का ETPBS का, वही NRIs के लिए भी एप्लीकेबल होगा, राइट? ये 5 डेज़ का क्लॉज याद रखिए. जो नोटिस ऑफ इलेक्शन जो आता है उसके विदिन 5 डेज यू हैव टू नोटिफाई और यू हैव टू इन्फॉर्म द रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर, राइट? एंड यहाँ पे NRIs के केस के अंदर रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर वुड बी अपॉइंटेड बाय अ इंडियन डिप्लोमेट in the embassy, right? I hope it is clear. The ECI has not specified whether the voter should send in ballot through ordinary post to the returning officer or drop it off at the Indian consular office or embassy, right? So it is still not clear. The Election Commission of India has not specified that आपको जो पोस्ट जो है वो ऑर्डिनरी पोस्ट यूज़ करनी है या आपको फिजिकली यू हैव टू गो टू द रिटर्निंग ऑफिसर एंड ड्रॉप टू द इंडियन कॉन्सुलर, राइट? So this is not yet clear. Now will this facility be available to all the overseas voters across countries? Guys, there were news reports that the Election Commission of India had indicated to the Ministry of External Affairs that it would want postal voting introduced on a pilot basis in non-Gulf countries. अब ये गल्फ कंट्रीज़ के अंदर तो इंडियन डायस्पोरा बहुत ज़्यादा है, राइट. अब ये नॉन गल्फ कंट्रीज़ के अंदर भी इसको एक्सटेंड करने की बात हो रही है, राइट. बट द इलेक्शन कमीशन ऑफ इंडिया ऑफिशियल्स टोल्ड द हिंदू that ECI had asked the Law Ministry to explore the possibility of extending the postal ballots to overseas electors and not restrict to any particular country, right. अब गवर्नमेंट ऑफ इंडिया मिनिस्ट्री ऑफ एक्सटर्नल अफेयर्स ने कहा है कि there is no we can do so, but there is huge logistics cost associated in this process, right. So there are huge logistical challenges which are associated, which needs to be resolved, right. I hope it is clear. So guys, are postal ballots a viable means of voting? The Etpbs method allows for greater turnout among service voters has allowed the greater turnout among the service voters in 2019 Lok Sabha elections, and with increasing mobility of citizens across the countries for reasons related to work, the postal ballot method has been recognized by International Institute for Democracy as a means to allow overseas voters to exercise their right subject to certain conditions normally related to time spent abroad or the work carried out abroad, right. A postal ballot mechanisms that allows for proper authentication of the ballot at designated consular embassy offices and an effective postal system should ease this process for NRIs. But guys, the rules must be clearly framed for eligibility on the basis of time spent away from the country, right. तो rules जो है वो properly डिज़ाइन करना जरूरी है on the basis of the time that is being spent away from the country, right. I hope you enjoyed the session, right. Please stay tuned, right. Press the like button and the bell icon for the regular updates. Do like, comment and share, right. Wish you all the best. I hope you enjoyed I hope you're enjoying the daily news analysis sessions, right. I'm your educator Prithviraj Singh signing off. Good day, goodbye.